share my screen.
Um, welcome to the Power of Productivity. It's a live stream discussion that I do regularly with industry experts around the nation. And today I have the pleasure of sitting and talking with Darrell Trimble. Briefly, my name is Joe Wainz, president of TurtleWorks. We help companies leverage their Microsoft's technology, and you can go to turtle.works, my website, to learn more about ways that you can leverage Microsoft 365. Now, as far as Darrell is concerned, I've known Darrell, I think, 4 years now. Initially reached out to him because he has an HR portal that runs on top of Microsoft 365, and I thought it was a great way to get a customer into something better than spreadsheets. But what Darrell really likes to talk about is business infrastructure, digital workplace, and employee self-service. Darrell, when you're trying to engage with a C-level, when you're trying to get some information from them so that you can figure out how to help them, there's probably things you could do, like ask, how are you using Microsoft 365, or how are you using Teams, and how is that working for you? But I'm wondering if there are other questions you use, or if you use those questions, because I know you really like to get into business infrastructure, digital workplace. So
Right.
how do you approach that conversation?
Well, it really comes down to, in some ways, um, it's not about technology. Okay. What organizations are going through in switching from the traditional file server network environment to Office 365 digital workplace. Oh, looks like my camera went out for some reason.
Yeah, it did.
Uh, Anyways, but you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. And it, Into a digital workplace. It really, what it really is, if you look at most organizations, and I talked to them about this, most organizations grew organically, and they came up and they form functional departments, and those functional departments, some of them are operational, sales, service, that type of thing. Other ones support the organization, HR, IT, even marketing supports the organization and is there for the employees. Now, the problem is in with there was no infrastructure before. There might have been a file server to share some files, but most communication is done via email. It's just a mass stream of email. A
Hmm.
lot of times the file structure is all over the place.
That's a
Even things,
given.
yep, and even
File
things like,
structures all over the place is a
yeah,
given.
and even things like, how do I get help? Do I make call marketing, or I email HR? Do I even know that they got my request? So if you look at it from the employee's eyes ins to an organization, it often looks like chaos, is what it
Hmm.
comes down to. Now, what's happening though with moving to a digital workplace is it's almost like you're building a new office building. Okay. You have a chance to actually organize things and put things where they're supposed to be. And the biggest benefit you can get out of Office 365 is to make it easy to do business inside your organization. And um, and what that really means is organizing things in such a way that you increase productivity because you're actually enabling self-service. You're enabling an employee to, number one, and we call them the four pillars of a digital workplace: communication. Okay, having a structure for how news goes out, how events happen, those type of things. The second one is resources, and resources, organizing your resources. Resources are your documents, your files, those type of things. And there's two things you have to look for in that. There is the documents that are confidential to the functional group that's doing it. If it's IT, it might be your warranties and your contracts and all that stuff. You don't want the rest of the employee population to get to that stuff, but you might want to make available, quick reference cards, those type of things, your policies, that is available to the entire employee population. So it's how you deal with audiences. So there's how employees get to resources and how those are governed. The next one is services. That's the next pillar. How do they get services? How do they get, in a consistent way, I need help or I need something? And oftentimes there's a help desk in IT, maybe other things all over the place. And the fourth one is business processes. How do they get to business processes in a consistent way? And what we call this is an internal business structure. What's your internal business structure? It's like designing an office building. Where does stuff go? HR's on the second floor in this area, IT's on the third floor in this area. You don't just allow people to go set up shacks all over an empty lot. You architect the structure of your building and where things are going to be, even down to file cabinets. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same thing goes with moving to a digital workplace.
So,
You want to
so
think about it in that
just to
way.
just to recap, what I'm hearing is, again, it's not really about technology. It's about structure,
Right.
and it's about communication and resources and internal services and business processes, and that's where you start to think about, well, how am I going to do this from a technology perspective? But
Right.
but the process, the I want to say the procedures, the thought process needs to have been done first before we can think about what widgets we're going to use to solve X, Y,
Exactly.
and
We
Z.
call that architecting the digital workplace.
Hmm.
And it's
Do you
setting up
have
a structure.
trouble getting C levels to make that jump, or I'm thinking, do they come into the room and they're just thinking technology, 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 or when you
No,
start
actually,
talking about what
actually,
you're
C
doing?
C levels are the easiest to get to understand that.
Okay.
It's the IT people that force it into the widget.
Hmm.
Honestly, they can't think above it. Those widgets are tools to support that infrastructure, and you want to use it in that way. And you also want to put governance around it, and just not, if you're bringing in teams, don't let everybody just use whatever team they want, because guess what? Now behind the team, now your resources, your documents are now scattered all over the place.
Hmm.
There is no file server. It's a whole different thought process going into this. So, so one of the key things is to do kind of your digital workplace design and say to the HR people, hey, here's your portal. This is where you guys live. It's kind of like, here's the second floor. This is where you guys are going to be in a building. That's how I do the analogy. And here's your portal. And here's your, and it happens to be a team. Here's the HR team. Okay. And by the way, only the HR team can get into this. And oh, there's document libraries. Here's where you keep your documents, and you might even have several of them. You might have a policies library, you might have an employee documents library, and so on. And you introduce them to that and say, this is where you need to keep stuff, because a freewheeling digital workplace will have that stuff all over the place, and it's very hard to put governance on it. Kind of like before, you had a file server you controlled, right?
Hmm.
Well, in the new world, those functional groups control everything. Okay.
True.
And if you let them just go, it's almost like, going back to the analogy, Microsoft gave us the tools. There's a bunch of materials. You don't go when you're building an office building and say, hey, everybody, here you go. And they set up shacks all over the place. Everything's done differently. Here's the HR shack on there. It doesn't even hook up to the same electricity and so on.
Hmm.
You design a building. Well,
Right.
the same thing you do with the digital workplace is you design it.
Right. So when
Because
I think
then,
of digital workplace or employee self-service,
mhm,
pre Microsoft 365, it was the file server and whatever business applications are installed, right? So the file server was all you really
right, and the
had for
business applications
self-service.
were kind of all over the place, and the
Right.
file server typically became a Frankenstein
It
of a
did.
hierarchy.
But the interface to your employee self-service was go to Windows File Explorer, find the F drive or the U drive or whatever
Right.
it was, and then find your department. And if you're trying to get something from another department, you find their department. And that was, and you know
If you
what?
have
It
if
was
you have
better
the
than what
access.
we had before, but now we've got SharePoint and we've got Teams that allows us to do a better experience for employee self-service.
Right.
So, which you're referring to with Teams, where we can build different
Right.
teams for the different
However, the issue comes in is, just like in your file server, you also had two audiences you had to worry about governing. The first audience was everything internal to that department, like HR.
Hmm.
Okay, and they had maybe their folders. But then you also have the employee audience, and this is where self-service comes in. You know, how does an employee get to whatever the latest drug use or drug testing policy is, or the time off, remote work policy, or in IT, what's the latest security policy for working at home, that type of stuff. They were all over the place. And what you want to do in now in the digital workplace is you have a home for those documents that are shared confidentially by that department, okay, but not for the rest of the employee population.
Hmm.
That's how Teams works. The problem with Teams is you can't share it with the rest of the employee population. So now the design has to be that you have an intranet, kind of a employee hub, and then what we call a doc center. And a doc center is all of those files and documents that employees need to get to from the different departments. And hopefully they don't have to go to every department to get it. You've actually got to search but you're actually going to have a separate set of libraries for the documents that employees can see, and a separate, which is in that SharePoint intranet site. And then Teams is where you would have the documents that only the HR staff or only the IT staff, the confidential staff only documents.
Hmm.
But what it does for the employee is they can go to one place and get to all the documents that they're allowed to get to without having to worry even about what department they're in. That's what we call a document central type model. But the departments maintain those documents
Hmm.
for the employees.
Hmm.
The same thing goes with business processes. Instead of having business processes scattered, oh, did I put it in my browser favorites? Is it on the icon on my screen? You have a destination for business processes.
Hmm.
Okay, and it's like a
Really,
website.
what you're really talking about is summarizing documents from all of the teams and all of the SharePoint sites that are relevant, but the employee doesn't have to go to all of those sites now. They can go to one place where it's all been summarized for them.
Right.
And then the same thing for business processes. So I know I need to submit a time off request. I could make the assumption that I have to go to HR, but I don't even have to go to HR's site. I can just go to, I think
A
you call it
process
Process
central
Central.
and link to
Um,
it.
yeah, those are two, I think very solid concepts on making it simple for employees to find what they need without having to go search all over.
Right.
There's one place to go. You bring up the browser, you go to Doc Central, or you go to Process Central.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And then you can even take that further, because remember, if you put yourself into the seat of the employee, okay, and we're all employees, right? Well, no matter what department we're in, departments tend to see things from the department out, but they don't realize employees have to deal with 7 different peers of different departments. And so the most important thing is, how do you do things in a consistent way that make it easy for the employee? Because the employee looking into the organization doesn't care about departments. They just want to get to the business process they want to get to. They want to get to the policy. They don't want to have to know what department things are in. And that's the concept of an employee hub and employee self-service, putting it into the eyes of the employee.
Hmm.
And that's and what they want, as opposed to each department doing things in their own ways. And and really, it's taking a concept of consistency from any customer service type organization, banks. Okay. If you look at banks, why is it every branch is set up in the same way in the whole banking industry? You walk in the door, there's tellers on one side and so on. It's about consistency. You don't want the customer to have to, whatever they're looking for, whatever service, whatever it is they're looking for, you don't want to have them say, how do I do this? You want
No,
them
we
to
don't.
just,
We don't want to. Don Miller's a marketing guy, and he talks about the cost of people having to process what's going on, basically a calories perspective. So we want them to burn as few calories as possible when they're experiencing the work that we do, or when they're experiencing something that they need to get done. So that's why, as you say, the banks are organized the same way. McDonald's is organized the same way.
Exactly.
It's just, we don't have to think, and that's not a bad thing, because we can save it for when we do need to think.
Right. And how this applies back to Office 365 and the digital workplace is, if you think about it, this is the one time, at least in my memory, that there's going to be a wholesale movement of technology, a redesign of where things go and how how they're available in an organization. Well, you don't want to take that lightly. You need to go design your office building before go and just take your file server and move it to OneDrive and say, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find that if you do this kind of design, which looks like, by the way, an org chart in a way, for your digital workplace design, that it will become very easy to migrate to it. You
Mm-hmm.
will be able to say, you know what, this folder that used to be on this server is going to go over into the HR department library, okay, in the HR team. Okay, and the one that this policies thing that all employees are supposed to get to, that folder will go to the employee self-service docs central library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay, and
this
you start,
process is like spring cleaning.
yeah,
And
you're setting up a map.
for sure, you're setting up the map. And I've also noticed, as businesses go through this process, three things happen. They discover, they have this category of, we don't need this anymore. So there's all of this stuff that they just get to delete, and they don't have to think about organizing it. And then there's this stuff that they need, but they don't want to spend any energy organizing it, because it's basically historic purposes only.
Right.
So they shove all that stuff in archive, and one or two people have access to it. They don't structure it or secure it. It's just this blob that it goes into. And if you need something, ask Fred or Sally, and they'll get it for you. And you don't ask them very often, because you don't need it very often. And then you get to the stuff that you're talking about, the remaining files, where, how do we structure this? And that map you're talking about is crucial.
Right. And so we call this a digital workplace structure. And it's actually turning off teams. Don't let people create any team they want. Put some governance over it. And then pre-design, just like an office building, or pre-architect this workplace and say, this is where the HR team will be, this is where the IT team will be, this is where marketing will keep their stuff, and so on, and tell them where to keep their stuff. And then also say, you're going to create a main marketing team. And if you want sub stuff like the social marketing team and the digital workplace marketing team, or whatever it might be, those are channels in the team. Mm-hmm. Because it keeps them in the same document libraries there, and it doesn't have them all strewn all over the place. That's what we mean by a digital workplace design. But then also realize you have to create a place called this employee hub that in essence rolls together the things for the employees. And that's where your intranet, and then what we call the self-service components of the intranet right below it, Doc Central, Process Central, Help Central. And Help Central is actually, we see a lot of companies moving towards putting in a central help desk that isn't a different help desk for each department, but a central help desk that can actually route requests. Again, same concept. The employee does not want to have to go in and because there's 10 different departments, use 10 ways of getting help.
Sure.
They want to go in and ask for help in one way and have a little maybe service catalog come up and say, here's what you want, and have the help desk route it to the right department and track it. Mm-hmm. And it gets rid of this total non-productivity approach of playing telephone tag and email tag with these departments and stuff like that. It puts in, again, a consistent way to get help. Mm-hmm. So that's three of the pillars. How do you organize documents and resources? How do you organize business processes? And how do you provide internal services.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final pillar is that the traditional intranet site of news, and putting that on the level and putting a news destination up there where people can go find, if they missed it in their email or whatever, they can go to a page just like you do with your customers on your website. You want your customers to come to a destination page that the customers can find out what products you have and everything else. If you just sent your customers emails all the time about products, that email will get lost 3 days later. So you create destinations for news, events, and those type of things that they can come to. It doesn't mean you stop sending emails, but you also give them a place that they can find that information. And so it's about creating destinations for resources and other things on a single page in that employee hub that they can get to things. And behind the scenes, you're using that digital workplace to populate the content, the
Mm-hmm.
files, the resources for that employee so they don't have to do the work.
Again, a summary type
Yep.
experience. Okay. So we've got a couple minutes left. You've hit the four pillars that you talked about, and I think that's great. And one of the things I like to do on these discussions is give folks some things that they can walk away with and try. If I were to pull some things out so far, it's one. It doesn't start with technology. It needs to start with a design. These four pillars that you talked about: communication, resources, business process, and internal services. And how are you going to do that? What are a couple other things that come to mind for you, Darrell, that if people would just take time to focus on these, their lives would be better?
Well, I think the other thing too is, and gosh, all of us know this, change. People don't want to change. You need to evolve to this. It's not a big bang theory. You need to, number one, you need to get management on board. They need to understand why they need to do this, um, and and set up this business infrastructure because it's going to save money all over the place. But um, you can start out by creating a communication site, okay, and in intranet, and start on the communication side. I know it's not the most important thing as far as productivity, but you can start out by doing that. The other thing too that is another tidbit that is behind all of this is you need to consolidate your tools and services on Office 365. Really, really important. You should not have 5 different meeting apps being used. You're already getting them for free. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you're out there using WebEx and another group is using Zoom and another group is using Teams, you need to consolidate onto a consistent set of tools. And
Mm-hmm.
you get a huge number of tools with Office 365. And so you go look at those and
It's
put in place a plan.
people have no idea what's in there, honestly. I
Yeah,
mean, what you're talking about. A lot of people know about Teams these days, but they haven't made the decision, and they just continue paying for WebEx or whatever else they're using, Zoom. But that really needs to be a clear business decision as to why I'm maintaining my Zoom license. There may be a compelling reason to do that, but it really needs to be considered.
right. And honestly, it's part of. I'll just say it's the CIO's job. Damn it.
Yeah,
It's part of that infrastructure thing, a
yeah.
common infrastructure, and that it has to start with what they're using
Hmm.
as tools in those infrastructures. And as painful as it may be, the benefits of actually using all those Office 365 tools that are out there instead of some of the standalone third-party ones is it integrates with everything, and it's going more and more that way. And so, from the CIO standpoint, consolidate your infrastructure,
Hmm.
consolidate the tools and what they're using,
For sure.
and some of the digital workplace will come naturally.
Hmm. Well, Darrell, this has been really good. So again, I've known Darrell for 4 years, and I've really enjoyed this conversation with him. Um, how do people get a hold of you, Darrell, if they want to
Well,
contact you and
uh,
learn about more
yeah,
about?
so I'm CEO of SP Marketplace, and we have basically a set of out of the box digital workplace products. that we have 11 products, everything from that Doc Central and other things that we've already put together, and it works in Teams and so on. So it's kind of a, if you would, a manufactured office building, and that, going back to that analogy, out there, that we've already thought of all the stuff. You don't have to do all the design. So that's what we do. We have a set of products called our Workplace Suite. Our website, as you see there, is spmarketplace.com. We also have services that we can design those digital workplaces, help you in that integration or in that transition there as well. And so spmarketplace.com is the best place to really find out about us. You can get a hold of me at my email, and I'll be glad to also, take questions or whatever you have for us. But we've been doing this for 10 years. We have 1,500 installations of our digital workplace products since 2012. And we've been evolving it with Microsoft. And the bottom line is you end up having much more productive employees. You have more productive departments across the board, and you're not transferring the chaos of the old traditional infrastructure, and just moving the chaos into a digital chaos.
For sure.
And that's the key thing. But
so folks, I've known Darrell again for 4 years, and as far as his products and services go, I will speak for them. I recommend them to clients. We'll recommend them or customize them to get them to where they need to be if there's something unique. It's good stuff. He's got good stuff.
And I finally figured out how to turn on my video here too at the end.
So I think we're all set then. There we go. Thanks. So to get a hold of me, TurtleWorks, again, my website, if you want to learn more about how to leverage Microsoft 365, that's really what we focus on. You bought the thing, you got over 25 plus products in there. Let us help you let us help you use them. Let us help you stop paying for Calendly or paying for WebEx or whatever. That's what we really enjoy doing. So if you want to book an appointment, you certainly can. That'll get to me, and you can get 15 minutes of my time. I have no problem talking with anybody, giving him some advice or giving him some tips.
And the other thing we have on our site too, by the way, is webinars, and they're webinars on how to document management in the digital workplace, how to make the transition, and a number of other educational webinars. So also check out spmarketplace.com for those. They're very helpful.
Yep. All right, Darrell, good stuff. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Joseph.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you.